Hello everyone, I'm Ifeoma, a front-end software engineer and a developer relations engineer. I have experiences with developer education and developer community management. And at the JAMDev, I will be speaking on the super combination of headless CMS and JAMStack. In this course, I will be addressing the benefits of making use of headless CMS and the JAMStack architecture. Now, let's roll it back a bit. Before we had the JAMStack, there were a couple of other stacks that were really popular. We had the LAMP stack, acronym for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And we also had the Mint stack, an acronym for MongoDB, Express.js, AngularJS, and Node.js. The JAM in JAMStack stands for JavaScript, API, and markup. Now, if we were to take it back a bit, when websites, well, not a bit actually, take it all the way back, how websites looked like much earlier. When websites were being created, it was really simple. If you could have a look or if you could visit really old websites, you'd see they were mostly made up of just text. That is, the front end layer were made up of just text, which is that HTML, and it was really simple creating websites like this. It did not take much, but as time went on, more content had to be served. Backend technology became advanced, and we started making use of a lot more like servers, databases, and there's a lot more stuff going on in the backend. And whenever web pages or websites, web applications had to be created, even if we're just 2-page web applications, it would take a lot in just running this website. Performance would usually get affected. And so to resolve this, CMSs were created, or traditional CMSs as we now know them. Examples of this really popular traditional CMSs, we have WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. Now this came with a benefit. The most popular benefit that comes with traditional CMS is the ease of use. You do not have to be a technical person to make use of traditional CMS. It became really easy to change content, make changes to websites. But they came with a couple of cons, and we had poor performances because a lot of these CMSs, to extend functionality, we make use of what is known as plugins. Plugins are usually used in CMSs to extend functionality or to add more functionality to them. And the more plugins being added, and like you'd want your website to have more functionality, you'd have to add more plugins. And the more plugins which are being added, that would also result in poor performance. And this would usually result in errors. Sometimes there would be errors from a lot of these plugins would clashing like code, and this would also result in, if you are very familiar with WordPress, you'd be very familiar with the very popular error. You'd be very familiar with the common error known as the white screen of death. And these CMSs made use of selective coding languages, usually on the back end. If you aren't very conversant in these languages, it will take you some time before you make use of those CMSs. It's going to take you time before you make use of that, because you'd have to pick up the language, or you would not be able to use that CMS at all. One of the very major cons with this was that the front end layer was tightly coupled to the back end layer. And so that means the front end layer was not independent of the back end layer. Whatever it was that was happening, if there was a downtime on the back end, it would affect the front end. The front end could not just exist without the back end. And this would usually result in engineers not being able to, or developers not being able to make use of the front end languages they would want to make use of when creating the presentational layer or the front end layer. And so it did come with a couple of solutions. It did at that time. Traditional services did come with a couple of solutions. Ease of use, yes, but they did lack flexibility. And because of these issues, we were able to have headless CMS. And the differences between headless CMS and traditional CMS is that the headless CMS comes with a decoupled front-end layer, and that makes it possible for engineers to be able to make use of whatever language they would want to make use of on the front end. Whatever happens on the back end, whatever happens on the server side, it's independent of whatever happens on the front end. For content to get displayed, an API is being served, and this API gets consumed by developers to be able to display content, serve content, and this made it a lot more easier. This also really improved performance, and of course, because of the decoupled front-end layer, there was a choice to be able to make use of whatever language you'd want to make use of, whatever framework you'd want to make use of, instead of just making use of the language that came with that CMS, or a language that came with that CMS, that's the traditional CMS. So because of all of this pros, it became really good to use, or it became a good idea to make use of headless CMS and the JAMStack. And well, headless CMS and JAMStack and headless CMS, a match made in developer heaven, and that is because it made things really easy for engineers and software developers. Workflow became really easier, and here I have an illustration of the database and the API just being served to the front end, all of them being independent, but the API data gotten from API being served to the front end. Well, the benefit of making use of headless CMS and JAMStack is that it provides a better software architecture, and it's scalable because of its non-monolithic architecture. And this is to say that because the back end and the front end are not tightly coupled, or the presentational layer, whenever there's an issue at the back end, it does not affect the front end. And if you recall my example of Acorn making use of traditional CMSs, where whenever there was an issue from the back end, it would always, and we tried to visit a website created, for example, it's popular CMS, for example, WordPress, you would see a white screen, nothing being displayed. But with headless CMS, WordPress also has its own headless CMS. And so for you to be able to make use of a web page, these errors going on in the back end would also affect the front end. But with headless CMS, this does not occur. There's also the ease of flexibility, and this is because you can be able to pick whatever languages you want to use on your back end or your front end, whatever it is. The power lies in the hands of the software developer. There's also a better workflow being created when you make use of headless CMS and JAMStack. Non-developers can manage content on the headless CMS. This is one of the reasons why I really like the combination of JAMStack and headless CMS. The fact that the developer comes in, creates the web application, and a non-technical person, probably the content manager, the person who manages content on the application, can manipulate the content, change content from the headless CMS. They do not have any business going into the code base because, well, they are non-technical anyway, and the developer does not always have to come in whenever content needs to be changed, unlike traditional CMSs where there's a downtime and issue. So the developer only comes in when they are absolutely needed. There's also enhanced security, and this is because of the separation of the back end and the front end, and well, more collaboration on the part of developers. Really popular JAMStack examples we have Next.js, which is based off React, Nox based off Vue, and Gatsby, which is also based off React. And we also have really popular headless CMS. There's Sanity, Butter CMS, Contentful, and Storyblock. Now, all of these CMSs do serve their content making use of the REST API, and the REST API gets consumed. The headless CMS provides APIs to be consumed, and this gets consumed by in the application in the JAMStack. in the JAMStack tool, for example, Next.js or Nuxt.js. And when this gets content is created in the headless CMS, and it also serves this content in form of an API which gets consumed by the JAMStack tool. Could be Next.js or Nuxt.js. For example, if you're making use of Next.js and Storyblock, you create your content in Storyblock, get your API gets served to you by Storyblock, and this gets consumed by your Next.js application, and your content gets displayed on the front end thanks to the API. And well, that's it. Like, you do not have to. So one of the benefits, well, while it is very popular for JAMStack applications to be used alone, one of the very popular reasons I would say why it's a benefit to make use of headless CMS and JAMStack is for reasons relating to security and for better workflow. Most of all, for better workflow, because it makes it easy for developers to create this application, and then if a content needs to be changed or worked on, there doesn't have to be so much back and forth. Whatever needs to be changed or whatever needs to be worked on can be done from the headless CMS. This is why, and another very good reason why we have this the makings of headless CMS and JAMStack is the fact that the backend gets separated. A lot of JAMStack tools also come with have their own backend and everything. They cater to that running and the servers and everything. So what has to be catered to is just the presentational layer. And so this is why I would strongly suggest making use of a headless CMS and a JAMStack. And this combination is usually suggested for businesses where web application content is always changed in the applications. Making use of headless CMS and JAMStack making use of a super combination of headless CMS and JAMStack is strongly suggested for applications where content is always being changed. So thank you for coming to my talk, and if you'd like to reach out to me or maybe even ask questions, please say hi to me on Twitter. I am always on Twitter at my personal Twitter account. Thank you.